My siblings have always looked down on me, a constant, subtle pressure that shaped my entire childhood. They made it clear, in 1,000 unspoken ways, that I wasn't quite one of them. That exclusion reached its peak when they each, one by one, banned me from their weddings. So when it was my turn to walk down the aisle, I simply returned the favor. I didn't invite them to mine, and the silence that followed my decision was more profound than any argument. The shockwave that rippled through my family left them utterly speechless, and for the first time in my life, I was the one in control of the narrative. My name is Amelia, and I am the youngest of 5 children. To say there was an age gap between me and the rest would be an understatement. My siblings, Liam, Ethan, Chloe, and Noah, were a generation unto themselves. They were a complete set, a constellation of stars so bright and tightly clustered that my own small light was easily lost in their glare. By the time I was toddling around, forming my first hazy memories of sunlight on the living room floor, they were already packing boxes, leaving for college, and carving out the beginnings of their adult lives. Their lives were a movie I had walked into 45 minutes late. I only existed in the spaces they left behind, a strange and lonely echo in increasingly empty hallways. I was an afterthought, the surprise postscript at the end of a long family letter. It was a strange sort of loneliness, to be surrounded by family history but feel like you have no place in it. But oh, how I loved them. When you're the smallest and the last, your older siblings are giants, titans of worldly knowledge and effortless cool. They were my heroes. I absolutely thought Liam, the eldest, had personally hung the moon and every star in the sky. He was everything a big brother was supposed to be, confident, charming, and impossibly cool. In my young eyes, he could do no wrong. Ethan was his opposite, quieter and more serious, with a thoughtful gaze that always seemed to be looking at something just beyond my grasp. Still, I adored him from a distance, hoping for a crumb of his quiet attention. And Chloe, she was my big sister, the blueprint for the person I desperately wanted to become. I watched her every move, studying the way she did her makeup, the way she laughed with her friends, the way she carried herself with a confidence I couldn't even begin to fathom. I dreamed of the day she would finally let me into her world, share her secrets, and teach me how to be just like her. Then there was Noah, the baby of the original 4, and the one closest to me in age. That proximity should have made us allies, but even he kept me at arm's length, as if my youth were a contagious disease he was afraid of catching. The first time the vague feeling of being an outsider sharpened into a painful, undeniable reality was the year of Liam's wedding. I was 10 years old. 10 is such a strange, in-between age. You feel impossibly grown up, ready for a seat at the adult table, yet everyone else still sees you as a child, ruffling your hair and speaking to you in that bright, simple tone reserved for toddlers and pets. When Liam and his fiancée, the lovely Olivia, announced they were having a child-free wedding, the rule slid right past me. It was a concept for other people, for my parents' friends who had loud, unruly kids. It couldn't possibly apply to me. I wasn't just some random child who would get bored and cause a scene, making noise during the vows or getting sticky fingerprints on the cake. I was his sister, his only sister, a thought I held onto like a precious stone. The title felt important, like it should grant me immunity. I can still feel the smooth, cool weight of the silver locket I'd picked out from my mom's jewelry box. I had asked her, my voice brimming with an excitement that felt like fizzy bubbles in my chest, if I could wear it for the big day. I had the whole scene pictured in my head, me in a beautiful new dress, wearing my mother's necklace, looking almost like one of the grown-ups. That's what her smile tightened, just a little at the corners. She sat me down on the edge of her bed, the festive mood in the room evaporating instantly. "Amelia," she started, and I knew from her tone that the news wasn't good. "Liam and Olivia are having an adults-only wedding, honey. You're not going to be able to come." The words didn't compute at first. I just stared at her, trying to find the joke. "But I'm his sister," I finally managed to say, my voice small. I'm not like other kids. I can be quiet, Mom. I promise. I won't make a single sound. I was trying to reason with her, to bargain my way in, to prove I was worthy. She just patted my head, a gesture that was meant to be comforting, but felt utterly dismissive, like I was a puppy who had just been told to stay. "It's just for adults, sweetie," she said, her voice soft with a pity that made my skin crawl. "You'll understand when you're older." I didn't understand. I didn't understand at all. It felt like a deep, personal rejection. I fled to my room and cried for hours, the kind of soul-shaking sobs that leave you exhausted and hollow. Liam was my brother, my hero, and I was being barred from witnessing the most important day of his life. I had already pictured Olivia as my new sister, and I desperately wanted to see her walk down the aisle, to be part of that magical moment. Instead, when the day came, my parents dressed in their finest clothes and left me with a babysitter. I remember the suffocating feeling of staring at the clock in the living room, each tick a painful reminder of another moment I was missing. I pictured the church, the flowers, the music, Liam standing at the altar. I imagined it all, a ghost at a feast I was forbidden to attend. When Liam and Olivia returned from their honeymoon, tanned and glowing with happiness, I held a tiny, hopeful flame in my heart. Maybe now he would talk about it. Maybe he'd apologize and say he wished I could have been there, or at least tell me a funny story. He didn't. He showed me pictures, pointing out distant relatives and friends, but he never once acknowledged my absence. It was as if it hadn't even occurred to him that I should have been a part of it. It was then I learned the harshest lesson of all. I wasn't just uninvited, I was completely irrelevant. 2 years later, the familiar buzz of wedding planning started up again. This time it was for Ethan. I was 12, and I had spent the intervening time meticulously crafting a new version of myself. I was determined to be seen as mature, as someone who could be trusted in an adult setting. I didn't whine or make a fuss. I did my chores without being asked, kept my room spotless, and made a point of being quiet and unobtrusive whenever company was over. I was on a 2-year campaign to prove that I was not a child, but a small, well-behaved adult. So, when my parents announced that Ethan and his fiancée were also planning a child-free wedding, a flicker of hope remained. It was a default setting, perhaps, a rule for the masses. But surely they would see the new me. They would see the effort I had put in. This time, I thought with a certainty that now feels heartbreakingly naive, this time I'll be invited. I was wrong. Once again, I was sat down and given the same gentle, patronizing speech. Ethan and his future wife wanted a quiet, adult affair. It was nothing personal. Nothing personal. The words echoed in my head. How could it not be personal? The first time, I could almost understand it. I was 10. But a second time, a pattern was forming, a clear and undeniable message being sent. It felt deeply personal, like a judgment on my very existence within the family. This time, however, I didn't cry. Not in front of them, anyway. I had learned that my tears made them uncomfortable and only solidified their view of me as a child, so I summoned every ounce of that maturity I had been practicing. I didn't beg, I didn't scream or protest. I simply sat there, my hands folded in my lap, and nodded quietly while my parents offered their flimsy excuses and placating smiles. My mom, likely sensing the fragile stillness in me, tried to offer a different kind of comfort. "You'll have your own wedding someday, Amelia, and it'll be the most wonderful day," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "You'll see." Her words were meant to be a balm, but they felt like salt on a fresh wound. It was never about wanting my own wedding, it was about being wanted at theirs. I was beginning to understand a devastating truth. My siblings didn't see me as real family, not in the way that truly mattered. I was a footnote, easily erased to make the page look cleaner. By the time Chloe got engaged, I was 15. I was a full-blown teenager, simmering with all the awkwardness, angst, and desperate yearning for inclusion that comes with that age. At first, there was a beacon of hope. Chloe, always the more modern and social one, didn't initially plan on banning kids. She wanted a big, lively party with everyone there. I allowed myself to get excited. I imagined helping her pick out flowers, maybe even being a junior bridesmaid. For a few blissful weeks, I felt like I was finally on the inside. But of course, the family had to weigh in. My aunts and uncles, the same ones who would praise my quiet demeanor to my face, started planting seeds of doubt in Chloe's ear. "Oh, it's just so refreshing to attend a wedding without kids running wild," one would say over Sunday dinner. "Children just make things so chaotic, don't you think?" another would add. They wore her down, chipping away at her resolve until she finally caved. The new rule was announced: no one under 16. I was 15 years and 10 months old, to be exact. The line had been drawn so close to me that it felt less like a rule and more like a targeted attack. It was a slap in the face. This time, I couldn't be quiet. I went straight to Chloe, my heart pounding with a righteous fury. "Can't you just make an exception for me?" I pleaded, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm your sister. I'll be 16 in 2 months. I'll be quiet, I promise." Chloe looked at me, her expression unyielding and serious. "If I make an exception for you, Amelia, then I have to make exceptions for all the other cousins. It just wouldn't be fair." Fair? The word snapped something inside me. All the hurt from Liam's wedding, all the quiet disappointment from Ethan's, it all came rushing to the surface. "Are you serious?" I was yelling now, the sound raw and unfamiliar in our quiet house. "It's not fair that I've been banned from every single one of your weddings. I'm not just some kid. I am your sister." My outburst brought my parents running. The verdict was swift and merciless. I was grounded for 6 months. 6 months for the crime of disrespecting Chloe and causing drama. I spent most of that sentence stewing in my bedroom, the anger and hurt crystallizing into something harder and colder. When Noah got engaged 2 years later, I was 17. I didn't even bother to ask. I was numb to the whole process, a veteran of rejection. I already knew I wouldn't be invited, and sure enough, the official, child-free wedding announcement came. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I just accepted it as an unchangeable fact of my life, like gravity or the color of the sky. But there was one final, bitter twist that managed to pierce through my numbness. My cousin, Sophia, who had just celebrated her 18th birthday a few months prior, was invited. I heard about it through the family grapevine, a casual mention from my mom about what Sophia was planning to wear. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. 18 was the magical age of adulthood, the arbitrary line she had crossed just in time. When my parents asked why I wasn't making a bigger deal about congratulating Noah, I just shrugged. What was there to say? I pulled out my phone and sent him a quick, sterile text. "Congrats. Hope it's a great day." Then I went to my room and closed the door, a ritual that had become second nature. By that point, I had started to check out emotionally. It was a defense mechanism, a way to protect what little was left of my heart. The evidence was overwhelming. I didn't matter to them, not in any meaningful way. I wasn't their little sister to be cherished and protected. I was just a kid they barely thought about, an inconvenient loose end. And it hurt. It really, really hurt. Years passed after the last wedding. The sharp, stabbing pain of each individual rejection slowly faded, coalescing into a dull, chronic ache in my chest. I stopped trying to force my way into my siblings' lives. Honestly, I was just so profoundly tired. There's only so many times you can run full speed at a locked door before you realize it's never going to open. I was tired of being the one left out, the one who had to beg for scraps of attention. I was tired of being the kid's sister who no one thought about unless it was convenient for them. So I just stopped. It wasn't a dramatic exit. It was a quiet, weary retreat into myself. By the time I met my now husband Leo, I had pretty much checked out of the family dynamic entirely. I had learned not to expect much from anyone, a sad lesson that had become a core part of my personality. Leo was the first person who ever really listened when I talked about my family. He didn't just hear the words, he heard the hurt hiding behind them. I remember the night I told him everything. We were sitting on his worn-out couch, the only light in the room coming from the soft glow of a street lamp outside his apartment window. I told him the whole story, from being 10 years old and crying over Liam's wedding to being 17 and feeling nothing at all about Noah's. I tried to tell it casually, with a detached, almost clinical tone, as if it were a story about someone else. I was trying to play it off like it didn't hurt anymore, a performance I had perfected over the years. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. He just stared at me, his expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "Wait," he said, his voice low. "Hold on. They didn't invite you? Not a single one of them? Not even when you were like 15? "Nope," I said, shrugging, trying to maintain my air of nonchalance. "What the hell?" He shook his head slowly, his brow furrowed. He seemed genuinely unable to process it. "You're their sister." He let out a short, incredulous laugh. He sat there for another minute, just shaking his head, before looking back at me, his eyes full of a protective anger that I had never seen before. "Amelia, that is seriously messed up." I think that was the moment everything shifted for me. In that one simple validation, the carefully constructed walls I had built around that pain began to crumble. For so many years, I had twisted myself into knots trying to justify their behavior. A child-free wedding sounds reasonable on paper, I tell myself. It wasn't like I was being deliberately targeted, right? It was just a rule. But hearing Leo's simple, unadulterated outrage made me see it for what it was. It was messed up. 4 separate times, my own siblings had made a conscious choice to exclude me. Not a single one of them, not once, had stopped and thought, "Hey, maybe our little sister should be there." It wasn't normal. It was cruel. So, when Leo and I got engaged a few years later, standing on a windy cliff overlooking the ocean, I knew one thing, with absolute, unshakable certainty. My wedding was going to be different. My wedding wasn't going to be about obligation or appearances. It was going to be filled with people who genuinely cared about me, people who had shown up for me in my life when it mattered. It would be a celebration of real love, shared with people who wanted to be there, not just people who felt they were expected to be. That's when I made the decision. I wasn't inviting my siblings. It wasn't some big, dramatic moment of vengeful clarity. I didn't draft an angry letter or stage a confrontation in the family group chat. I just quietly and deliberately left their names off the guest list when we sent out the invitations. It was as simple and as complicated as that. I knew, on some level, that the fallout would be immense. But I was done living my life to manage their feelings. I would cross that bridge when I came to it. The first tremor of the impending earthquake came about 2 months before the wedding. My mom called me on a random Tuesday afternoon, her voice unnervingly cheerful. I should have known immediately that something was up. She only ever used that syrupy sweet tone when she was about to ask for something or deliver bad news she wanted to soften. "So, Amelia," she began, drawing out my name, "how are the wedding plans coming along?" "Good," I said, cautiously, my guard instantly up. "Everything's pretty much done, actually." "Oh, that's just wonderful," she chirped. There was a brief, calculated pause before she dropped the bomb. "You know, your brothers and sister were just saying they haven't gotten their invitations yet. Did you send them out already?" My heart started to pound against my ribs, a heavy, frantic drumbeat. This was it. This was the conversation I had been dreading. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice even. "Yeah, Mom, I sent them out a while ago." She didn't miss a beat. "Well, that's so strange. They didn't get one. Maybe they all got lost in the mail?" I sighed, the sound heavy with years of exhaustion. It was time to rip off the Band-Aid. "Mom," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "I didn't invite them." There was a profound silence on the other end of the line. It was a heavy, shocked pause that seemed to stretch for an eternity, sucking all the air out of the room. And then, just as I knew it would, came the explosion. "What?" My mother's voice finally returned, sharp and laced with a new, dangerous edge. "Amelia, what are you talking about? How could you possibly not invite your own family, your own siblings to your wedding? What is wrong with you?" I gripped the phone, pressing the cool plastic against my ear to brace myself. I tried to stay calm, to keep my voice even and measured. I would not let her drag me back down to the level of a hysterical teenager. "They didn't invite me to their weddings, Mom," I repeated slowly, as if explaining a simple concept to a child. "Not a single one of them. So now I'm returning the favor. It's only fair." "Fair?" She practically shrieked the word. "That was completely different, and you know it. You were young. They were adults having adult parties. They didn't do it to hurt you." A bitter, humorless laugh escaped my lips. "Oh, they didn't mean to? Well, it hurt anyway. It hurt every single time, and I am done pretending that it didn't." The guilt trip began immediately, a tactic she had mastered over decades. "Amelia, you are being spiteful and cruel. Family is family. You don't just shut them out like this over something so petty. My God, what are people going to think?" And there it was. The question that ruled her world, the core of her every anxiety. What will people think? It was never about my feelings, only about how our family appeared to the outside world. "I don't care what people think, Mom," I said, cutting her off before she could gain any more momentum. "This is my wedding, Leo's and my wedding, and we are only inviting people who genuinely love and care about us. My siblings didn't care enough to include me in the biggest days of their lives, so I really don't see why they deserve a front row seat at mine." She hung up on me. I wasn't surprised. I stared at the silent phone in my hand, my heart still hammering, but a strange sense of peace began to settle over me. The first shot had been fired, and I was still standing. That night, the family group chat, a digital space I usually kept muted, blew up. The notification banners streamed across the top of my phone screen, one after another. It started with Chloe, her message dripping with the fake sweetness she was so famous for. "Hey, Em, hope you're doing well. Just wondering if something happened with the mail? We haven't gotten our invites yet, and we're starting to worry. XO. Then came Ethan, always more blunt, getting straight to the point. "What's going on, Amelia? Mom called. Why aren't we invited?" I stared at my phone for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. A war raged within me. Part of me, the wounded child that still lived inside, wanted to unleash everything. I wanted to type out a novel's worth of pain, to detail every tear I cried, every moment I felt invisible, to force them to finally see the years of hurt they had inflicted. But another, wiser part of me held back. What was the point? They wouldn't get it. They never had. They would twist my words, call me dramatic, and paint me as the unhinged one for finally speaking the truth. So I did nothing. I didn't type a single word. I just left the chat on read. Leo noticed my silence during dinner. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. I wordlessly slid my phone across the table. He read the messages, his expression hardening. He looked up at me and shook his head. "You don't owe them an explanation, Mia," he said, his voice firm. "They made their choices for years. Now you've made yours." "Yeah, but," I trailed off, the old fear creeping in. "They're going to make me out to be the bad guy. I know they are." "Let them," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. His grip was warm and steady. "You and I know the truth. That is all that matters." The next day, they escalated. My parents showed up at our apartment completely unannounced. I didn't even have to ask why they were there. The thunderous expression on my mom's face said it all. The second I opened the door, she stormed past me into the living room. "What are you thinking, Amelia?" she demanded, whirling around to face me. "Not inviting your own flesh and blood to your wedding? What kind of a cold-hearted person does that?" I took a deep breath, Leo a silent, supportive presence at my back. Mom, I already told you on the phone. They didn't think I was important enough to be at their weddings, so I'm not including them in mine. It's that simple. My dad, who had been standing silently by the door, finally spoke up, his voice stern and laced with disappointment. You're being childish, Amelia. You're holding on to something that happened years ago. It's time to grow up. That's when I snapped. The calm I had been clinging to shattered into a million pieces. I was a child when they did it, Dad. My voice rose, trembling with the force of 2 decades of suppressed pain. I was a little girl who begged to be at her own brother's wedding. I was the one left crying at home with a babysitter. And it didn't just happen once, it happened 4 times. Don't you dare talk to me about being childish when they were the ones who repeatedly shut out a child who adored them. They stared at me, completely stunned into silence. They had no answer for that. My mom's face crumpled, her eyes welling up with tears. But for the first time in my life, her sorrow held no power over me. I wasn't going to let her guilt me this time. You can keep defending them if you want, I said, my voice steady now, hardened by my resolve. But I am not changing my mind. If they cared about me, they would have shown it back then. They left, their faces a mask of fury and frustration. And as I closed the door behind them, I felt a profound sense of release. The battle was far from over, but I had survived the first major assault. After the disastrous in-person visit, the messages from my siblings grew significantly nastier. The thin veneer of confused concern was stripped away, revealing the raw, angry entitlement beneath. Ethan's messages were short and sharp, calling me selfish and cold. Chloe sent long, rambling paragraphs about how I was ruining the family and breaking our parents' hearts. Noah, in a rare burst of communication, kept it simple and brutal. You're being incredibly petty, Amelia. Just grow up. I didn't reply to any of them. I read each message, let the sting of it wash over me for a moment, and then put my phone down. There was no point in defending myself anymore. I had already explained my reasoning to my parents. It was clear the message had been delivered and summarily rejected. Arguing with them now would be like screaming into a hurricane. One night, Leo found me sitting on the couch, endlessly scrolling through the toxic thread of messages, my expression grim. He sat down beside me, wrapped his arms around my shoulders, and rested his chin on my head. He didn't have to ask what was wrong. He just held me for a moment before whispering, I'm so proud of you, for standing up for yourself like this. Tears pricked my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. It was a swell of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. For the first time, amidst all the anger and drama, I felt proud of myself too. After that first round of family drama, I had naively expected things to die down. I figured they would grumble to each other for a while, complain to some distant cousins, and then eventually move on. That's how things usually went when my family didn't get their way. But I had severely underestimated just how determined they were to make this my fault. It started small, as these things often do. Chloe, naturally, couldn't resist firing the first public shot. She posted a passive-aggressive status on Life Feed, complete with a smiling picture of the 4 of them from a past holiday. Family is forever, even when some people forget what that word means. I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might actually get stuck in the back of my head. I showed the post to Leo, who just shook his head in disbelief. What is she, 14 years old? He muttered. Basically, I said, trying to brush it off. I told myself it didn't matter. I knew the truth, and I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong. But a part of me couldn't help but feel the sting. It's a uniquely painful experience to have your own sister go out of her way to publicly shame you. It didn't stop there. Over the next few days, little jabs and pointed comments began showing up in our extended family group chat. I'd muted it long ago, but Leo hadn't. He was checking his phone one afternoon when his expression soured. Amelia, he said hesitantly, you might want to see this. The messages were flying. An aunt wrote, Chloe, it's just so sad when family starts prioritizing petty grudges over true love. Ethan chimed in with, I just don't understand it. I thought we raised her to be better than this. And then Liam, my good old I'm the eldest and I know best brother, decided to weigh in with his profound wisdom. I never realized how much bitterness you've been holding on to, Amelia. It's truly sad. You're ruining lifelong relationships over something that happened decades ago. My blood began to boil as I stared at the screen. They didn't get it. They still, after all of this, did not get it. They were framing it as if I were blowing a minor childhood grievance out of proportion, conveniently ignoring the fact that it was a pattern of behavior that defined my entire life within the family. I wanted to reply so badly. My fingers twitched, itching to type out every single instance of their hypocrisy and throw it back in their faces. But I knew better. Arguing with them would only give them more ammunition. They would twist my words, screenshot my anger, and use it as proof that I was dramatic or unstable or whatever else they needed to believe to avoid taking responsibility. So, instead, I did the one thing they never expected. I opened the group settings, found my name, and tapped Leave Chat. That night, my mom called. She jumped straight into yelling the second I answered. "Amelia, what is wrong with you?" "Hi to you too, Mom," I said flatly. "Don't you start with that attitude," she snapped. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Your siblings are heartbroken. You are destroying this family." "Heartbroken?" I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. They ignored me for my entire childhood, but now that I've left a group chat, they're heartbroken? Oh, please, give me a break. You're being so spiteful. You've always been like this, holding on to ancient grudges and making everything about you. That's when I finally lost it. I'm the one holding grudges? Mom, I was 10 years old when Liam got married. 10. I cried for hours because I just wanted to be there, and you all told me I didn't matter enough to be included. And it didn't stop. I begged to be at Chloe's wedding, and she told me no because it wouldn't be fair. You all stood by and watched it happen again and again. You decided I wasn't important enough back then, so why on earth should you suddenly get a front row seat to my life now? She was silent for a beat, completely unprepared for my detailed rebuttal, so she tried to flip the script. "This isn't about the weddings anymore, Amelia. This is about you pushing everyone away because you're bitter. Leo is probably encouraging you, isn't he?" "Oh my God, Mom, stop it," I groaned. "Stop blaming Leo. This has nothing to do with him. This is about me finally realizing that I deserve better than to be treated like an afterthought." Her voice softened then, shifting into her final resort tactic, the concerned, pitying mother. "Amelia, you don't understand. Friends and partners, they come and go. But in the end, family is all you'll have. Your family is forever." "No," I said firmly, a new clarity ringing in my voice. "Family is supposed to love you. They're supposed to support you and care about you. That is not what any of you have been to me." She started crying then, the big, dramatic sobs that I knew were designed for maximum guilt. "You will regret this one day, Amelia," she said through her tears. "You'll see." "I don't think I will," I said quietly, and before she could reply, I hung up the phone. Over the next week, the fallout continued, but I felt a new sense of detachment from it. I had weathered the worst of the storm, and now I was just cleaning up the debris. I went through my social media and blocked Chloe and Ethan, not out of spite, but as a simple act of self-preservation. I couldn't heal with their constant snide commentary popping up on my screen. My mom, having been blocked herself, apparently tried calling Leo twice, likely hoping to appeal to his senses and turn him into an ally in her campaign. He, being the incredible man that he is, simply didn't answer. Then Liam, ever the patriarch in training, sent me a long, formal email. The subject line was "Forgiveness and Family Unity." I almost laughed out loud. It was a masterpiece of sanctimonious drivel, filled with platitudes about letting go of anger and the importance of grace. He even had the audacity to quote a Bible verse about turning the other cheek. The hypocrisy was so potent, it practically radiated from the screen. This was the man whose rejection had started the entire avalanche of pain, and here he was lecturing me about forgiveness. I read the first few lines, shook my head, and archived it without a response. That night, I finally vented everything to Leo, the frustration of the last few weeks pouring out of me. It's like they're living in a completely different reality, I said, pacing back and forth in our small living room. They are absolutely determined to pretend that I am the problem. They genuinely don't see how messed up it is that they ignored me for 20 years and then have a complete meltdown when I finally stand up for myself. Leo listened patiently, his eyes thoughtful. When I finally ran out of steam, he said something so simple and so profound that it stopped me in my tracks. "You know what it is," he said quietly. "They're not really mad that they weren't invited to the wedding." He paused, letting the thought hang in the air. "They're mad that they don't get to control you anymore." It hit me like a punch to the gut. He was right. Oh my God, he was right. My entire life, my family had treated me like an afterthought, a satellite character in their story whose feelings could be dismissed whenever it suited them. They held the power. They could include me or exclude me at their whim, and I was expected to just accept it. But now, I was an adult. I was building a life of my own, with him, and I was making a decision that they had no say in. I was taking the control back, and they couldn't handle it. Their anger wasn't about love or family, it was about power. "They'll get over it eventually," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. And then Leo said the words that truly set me free. "Maybe they will, maybe they won't," he said, shrugging gently. "But either way, Mia, it's not your problem anymore." He was right. For the first time, the full weight of that truth settled over me. I didn't owe my family anything, not my time, not my emotional energy, and certainly not an invitation to the most important day of my life. My only responsibility was to my own happiness and to the beautiful new family we were about to create. A week later, my dad sent me a short, guilt-laden text message. It was his last-ditch effort. "Amelia, your mom isn't doing well. She's really upset about all of this. Maybe you could find it in your heart to reconsider." I stared at the message for a long time, the words a perfect representation of their entire strategy, using my mother's emotional state as a weapon to manage me. The old Amelia would have felt a pang of guilt, but the new Amelia simply typed back a reply. Maybe she should have thought about that before she and her other children ignored me all those years. I hit send. Then I blocked his number too. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt utterly and completely free. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a strange mix of pure excitement and lingering tension. On one hand, I was deliriously happy, counting down the days until I could marry Leo. On the other, the family drama still hung in the air like an unwelcome ghost. My parents had finally stopped trying to contact me directly, probably because I'd blocked all their numbers, but that didn't stop them from deploying others. My Aunt Carol called me out of the blue one afternoon. I hadn't spoken to her in years, so I was immediately suspicious. "Amelia, honey," she began in her sweet but deeply condescending tone, "I just don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this. Family is family. It's simply not right to leave your poor siblings out of your wedding." I sighed, gripping the phone a little tighter. "Aunt Carol, with all due respect, this has been years in the making. My mind is made up." "But it's family," she pressed, as if that one word was a magical incantation that should fix everything. I closed my eyes, picturing Leo's face. "Being the bigger person doesn't mean letting people walk all over you, Aunt Carol. It means knowing when to put your own well-being first." There was a dramatic sigh on the other end. "Well, I just hope you don't regret this one day. You're going to miss your family, and they won't be there for you." I didn't say anything. I just hung up. The morning of the wedding, I woke up feeling an odd combination of profound peace and jittery nerves. It wasn't the normal, what if it rains kind of jitters. It was the deep-seated fear that they would find a way to insert themselves into my day, to cast a shadow over my happiness. But Leo, my amazing, perfect Leo, refused to let me dwell on it. As I was sharing my worries with him over the phone while we got ready in separate rooms, he just laughed softly. Mia, this day is about us. Nothing and no one else matters. And hey, if anyone tries to ruin it, I will personally and very happily escort them out myself. That finally made me laugh, a real, genuine laugh that broke through the tension. For the first time in weeks, I felt lighter. The ghosts were receding. The venue we chose was perfect, a sanctuary that felt worlds away from all the recent ugliness. It was a small, intimate garden, tucked away and surrounded by a lush tapestry of flowers. We had strung what felt like thousands of tiny twinkle lights through the branches of the old, sprawling trees, and they cast a warm, magical glow over everything. At the center of it all was a little wooden gazebo where Leo and I would say our vows. I had never wanted a giant, elaborate affair. I just wanted something that felt real, something overflowing with a love that was genuine and unconditional. And that's exactly what it was. My closest friends were there, the ones who held my hand through every storm. A few of my extended family members had come too, the kind cousins and cool aunts who had always shown me warmth without any strings attached. There were no obligations, no fake smiles, no one just showing up out of a sense of duty. It felt right. As I stood in front of the full-length mirror, making the final adjustments to my dress, my best friend and maid of honor, Maya, walked in. She leaned against the doorframe, a wide, genuine grin spreading across her face. "You look absolutely breathtaking, Mia," she said, her voice soft. "Thanks," I whispered, my own voice thick with a sudden wave of emotions. I turned back to the mirror, fussing with a piece of lace. Maya walked over and sat on the edge of the plush couch, watching me for a moment. Her cheerful expression softened into one of gentle concern. "Are you okay? For real?" I hesitated, then gave a slow nod. Yeah, I'm great. I'm just, I don't know, sad, I guess." I quickly turned to her, not wanting her to misunderstand. "Oh my God, no. Today is perfect. It's more than I ever could have dreamed of. It's just about the fact that my family isn't here." She frowned, her brow furrowing with sympathy. "Amelia, it is completely okay to feel that. Just because you made the right and necessary choice doesn't mean it doesn't hurt." Her words hit me with such force that I had to sit down on the ottoman across from her. The tears I'd been holding back finally welled in my eyes. "I just wanted them to care, you know," I said, my voice cracking. "I spent my whole childhood just wanting them to fight for me, to think I was worth including, and they never did." Maya immediately stood up and wrapped me in a tight hug. I leaned into her, letting myself feel the grief for a moment, not for the family I had, but for the family I had always wished for. "You don't need their approval anymore," she murmured into my hair. "You have a whole garden full of people out there who love you exactly as you are. Focus on that. Focus on Leo." I nodded against her shoulder, taking a deep, steadying breath. She was right. Today was not about the people who weren't there. It was about the man who was waiting for me. When the music for the ceremony started, a sense of calm washed over me, so profound that it silenced all the other noise in my head. I remember standing at the far end of the grassy aisle, my eyes locking on Leo standing under the gazebo, and a single thought echoed in my mind: this is it. This is what true happiness feels like. As I began to walk toward him, I felt a lifetime of weight shedding from my shoulders with each step. I wasn't the forgotten little sister anymore. I wasn't the kid who had to beg for a place at the table only to be turned away. I was a bride, a woman, surrounded by people who saw me, who cherished me, and who were here to celebrate my joy. The vows were perfect. Leo promised to always protect me, to be my fiercest defender, and to always, always stand by my side. A promise that, from him, meant everything. I promised him the same. By the time we said "I do" and he kissed me, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience, including my own. The reception was a dream. We laughed until our sides hurt, we ate delicious food, and we danced for hours under the canopy of twinkling lights. My friends gave toasts that were funny and heartfelt, sharing stories that made me feel so deeply known and loved. Leo's parents, who had treated me like a daughter from the day we met, hugged me and told me how proud they were to finally have me as part of their family. At one point, I snuck away from the dance floor just to take it all in. I stood at the edge of the garden, looking at the beautiful scene, the lights glittering in the trees, the joyful cluster of people laughing and talking, and my heart felt so full it might burst. For so many years, I had believed the subtle, insidious lie my family had taught me, that I didn't matter, that I wasn't important enough to be included. But standing there, watching all these people who had shown up for me, I finally understood. I mattered. I mattered to the people who actually deserved to have me in their lives. Later that night, as the reception began to wind down, one of my cousins pulled me aside, a sheepish look on her face. "Hey, I probably shouldn't even be telling you this, but..." I groaned internally, bracing myself. "What is it now?" "Your mom and Chloe, apparently they threw some kind of big family dinner tonight," she said, looking apologetic. "Like, as a protest, an alternative to your wedding." I stared at her for a blank second, and then a laugh erupted out of me, loud and genuine. I hoped she wasn't upset. "I know, it's so pathetic. I just thought you should know." I shook my head, still laughing. The idea of them gathered around a dinner table, stewing in their own self-righteousness, was just too absurd. "That's fine. Let them have their little pity party. I hope the food's good." I could tell my cousin was surprised by my reaction, but honestly, I wasn't hurt at all. If anything, it was the final, perfect confirmation that I had made the right decision. My family had spent my entire life excluding me, and then trying to justify it. Now that I was the one drawing the boundary, they couldn't handle it, so they had to create a competing event to feel like they were still in control. At the end of the night, Leo and I shared one last dance. As we swayed together, I rested my head on his chest and whispered, "I am so happy we did this, exactly like this." He smiled down at me. "Me too, Mia. This is just the beginning." And as I looked around the room at the faces of my real family, the family I had chosen, I knew he was right. I had everything I ever needed, and none of it had ever come from them. I thought the worst of it was over after the wedding. I really, truly did. The day itself was a bubble of pure joy, more perfect than I ever could have imagined. I felt like I had finally crossed a finish line, breaking the tape and moving on from the suffocating nonsense of my family. I hadn't missed them at the ceremony. I hadn't spent a single second wondering what it would have been like if they were there. I was completely and utterly happy, surrounded by people who loved me for me. That, I was learning, was more than enough. But if there is one thing I have learned about my family, it is that they cannot stand being ignored. It was almost as if they couldn't handle the simple fact that I was happy without them. My joy was an act of defiance they couldn't tolerate. So they decided to stir the pot one last time. Of course, it started with Chloe. A week after the wedding, a message from her popped up on my phone. "Saw some pics from your wedding," it read. "I can't believe you had it in a garden. Looked casual, but I guess that's what you wanted." I stared at the message, stunned by the sheer, unadulterated pettiness. She couldn't even pretend to offer a hollow congratulations. It wasn't enough for her to be absent. She had to find a way to diminish my perfect day, to subtly imply that it was somehow less than hers. For a fleeting moment, I was tempted to reply with something equally snarky. Something like, "It might have been casual, Chloe, but at least it wasn't full of fake smiles and people who secretly can't stand each other." But I stopped myself. I took a deep breath, held down on the message bubble, and pressed delete. She didn't deserve a response. A few days later, the real campaign began. Apparently, Chloe, Liam, and Ethan were systematically working their way through our extended family, painting me as a cold, vengeful villain. Aunt Carol, clearly having received her talking points, sent me another message. "Amelia, I don't know what happened between you and your siblings, but they are all so terribly hurt. Chloe says she has tried to reach out to you and you're just ignoring her. Maybe it's time to finally let go of the past." I sighed and tossed my phone onto the couch, rubbing my temples. How many times did I have to explain this? How many relatives did they need to rope into this exhausting mess before they realized I wasn't going to budge? Leo noticed my frustration and sat down beside me. "Another guilt trip?" he asked, glancing at my phone. "Yeah, Aunt Carol, on behalf of the heartbroken siblings." He snorted. "Hurt? Because they can't bully you into submission anymore?" He wasn't wrong. I leaned against him, feeling a wave of exhaustion. "I just don't get it, Leo. They ignored me for years. I begged to be part of their lives, and they shut me out every single time. Now I'm suddenly the bad guy for setting a single boundary." "That's how it always goes," he said softly, wrapping an arm around me. "When you finally start protecting yourself, the people who benefited from you having no boundaries are the first ones to cry foul." The real low point came a few days later when my mom showed up unannounced once again. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon. Leo and I were in our pajamas, laughing over a batch of slightly burnt pancakes and enjoying the quiet of our new life together. A sharp knock on the door shattered the peace. I froze. I just knew it was her. Sure enough, I opened the door to find my mom standing there, her face a mask of dramatic sorrow. "Amelia," she said, her voice already thick with disappointment, "we need to talk." I sighed, blocking the doorway. "Mom, really isn't a good time." She didn't care. She pushed the door open slightly, trying to step inside as if her maternal status granted her automatic entry. Leo appeared behind me, a silent, steadying presence. He didn't say a word, but his hand on the small of my back gave me strength. "Amelia, please," she continued, her voice pleading. "This has gone on long enough. Your siblings are devastated." Devastated? My voice was calm, almost eerily so. The anger had burned away, leaving behind only a cold, hard clarity. "Mom, you don't get to show up here and lecture me. I invited the people to my wedding who actually care about me. My siblings didn't make the cut. That is their fault, not mine." Her face fell into that familiar expression of disbelief, as if she couldn't possibly comprehend my defiance. "You don't mean that. They love you, Amelia. They're your family." "No, Mom," I said, my voice firm, looking her directly in the eye. "Family doesn't make you feel small. Family doesn't systematically leave you out when you're a child and then demand to be included in your life when it's convenient for them. I spent my entire childhood trying to prove that I mattered to them, and they never, ever cared. I'm done." She blinked, stunned into silence for once. I could see the wheels turning, the next argument forming, but before she could speak, Leo stepped forward just enough to be seen. "I think it's time for you to leave," he said, his voice gentle but unbreakable. My mom looked between the two of us, her face a tragic mixture of anger and sadness. "You will regret this, Amelia," she said, her voice dropping to a soft, prophetic whisper. "You'll miss us one day, and we won't be there." I met her watery gaze, unflinching. "No, Mom," I said, "I won't." Leo gently closed the door. I stood there for a long moment, just breathing. I thought I would feel a wave of guilt, but all I felt was a profound, earth-shattering relief. The next day, a text from Ethan came through. Mom said she came to talk to you and you slammed the door in her face. Real mature, Amelia. You've turned into someone I don't even recognize. I read the message aloud to Leo. He just shook his head. Block him, he said. You don't need that poison. And I did. One by one, I went through my contacts and blocked every single sibling and relative who had decided to join the guilt train. I realized something important that day. I didn't owe them my time, my energy, or an explanation. For years, they had made me feel invisible. Now, I was finally taking control. The weeks that followed were quiet for the first time in my adult life. Without the constant barrage of messages and passive-aggressive comments, I finally felt like I could breathe. One night, a month after the wedding, Leo turned to me as we were curled up on the couch. "Do you regret it at all?" he asked softly. "Not having them there?" I thought about it for a moment, searching my heart for any trace of regret. There was none. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I honestly thought I would, but I don't. I spent so long trying to earn their approval. And for what? I don't miss them. I don't miss feeling like I'm not good enough." He smiled and squeezed my hand. "Good. You deserve better." I got one final message, sent from a number I didn't recognize. It was from Chloe. "You've destroyed this family, Amelia. I hope you're happy." I stared at the screen for a second. Then I deleted the message and blocked the number. I didn't even feel a flicker of anger anymore. I just felt done. Because I was happy. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing their approval. I wasn't begging for scraps of love and attention. I was happy, I was loved, and I was free. I was surrounded by a family I had chosen, and that was more than enough. It always had been. Amelia's journey is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most important boundaries we set are with the very people we're taught we owe unconditional love. For years, she chased the approval of a family that saw her as an afterthought, believing their validation was the key to her own worth. But her story teaches us a profound lesson. You are not obligated to keep a place at your table for those who have repeatedly shown you that you don't matter. Setting a boundary isn't an act of revenge. It's an act of radical self-preservation. It is the moment you finally decide that your own peace is more important than catering to the comfort of those who have hurt you. Her story champions the idea that family isn't just about blood. It's about who respects you, who supports you, and who makes you feel seen. You are not responsible for the chaos that ensues when you stop allowing others to control your narrative and finally choose to stand up for the child you used to be. If these kinds of powerful stories about finding strength and setting boundaries resonate with you, please take a moment to like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell, as your support is what allows us to continue bringing these incredible journeys to light. Every single interaction helps our community grow. And speaking of our community, it is amazing to see how far these stories travel. We would love to know where you are joining us from. Please drop a comment below and let us know which region or country you're watching from. Thank you so much for being here.